Everybody, okay, we're climbing pretty fast now that it's 3 o'clock. So everybody, thank you for joining us. It's, Ryan's been kind of a staple in the area as an appraiser and market statistics and all that fun stuff, and figured today was as good as any to have a conversation around market statistics and just kind of talk about what we're seeing in the marketplace, and then also taking that into does that change our strategy, our approach, our game plan, all that fun stuff. So just some housekeeping. This is a webinar format, so it's a little bit different than the meetings that everybody's been used to with 100 boxes up on the screen. And so if you would like to say something, best way to do it is in the chat. And so if you go down the bottom of the bar, there's a chat button, and you can either say something to all panelists or everyone, meaning all panelists and attendees. So there's a little drop down right there. So if you want to throw a question out for any one of us, you can do that. It is a webinar, so we don't have to have the conversation about the dogs barking in the background or anything like that. So, which is always a plus. And hopefully it saves a little bit on bandwidth, so everybody gets a good signal and a good feed as a viewer. So with that said, we're almost up to 70 people on here so far. So fun times, climbing by the minute. All right, so I'll just jump in. We have 3 of us on here that are going to facilitate kind of this just casual conversation about the market and what we're seeing. And so I'm Patrick Woods. I am the operating principal of the Keller Williams Realty in Elk Grove. It just essentially means I'm one of the owners of that franchise down there. I've been in real estate since 2002. So I've been in it for a little while. So I've seen a market correction. I used to own a .com during the .com bubble collapse. So I've seen some market corrections, real estate and otherwise, and to be determined on where this one is heading. So we'll go from there. So I'll throw it over to Kris, and then we'll go to Ryan, so you can kind of let everybody know that, just in case they don't know who we are, we can let them know. And this is open to everybody, by the way. So it's not just a KW event, even though there's 2 KW guys on here.
Right. So the KW people think we're stupid. Well, why are they telling us who they are?
Exactly.
So Patrick, thanks. I'm Kris Vogt, team leader in the Elk Grove Market Center. While Patrick's substantially younger than me, he is my boss, just for the record here.
Business partner.
We're in business together. Anyhow, so got my real estate license in 1991. So I began in a little bit of a real estate recession. Been through the ups and downs and the sideways as an agent, managing broker for years, regional, and so so been through the ups and downs and the thick and thin, and excited to have Mr. Ryan Lundquist here today, because you've done Patrick and I were talking about you earlier today, and in a good way, because that's why we had you on. But no, you've done a remarkable job, aside from the fact that you know your stuff, you know your numbers, and you do a great job of being insightful and transparent and authentic. But you've also done a great job of kind of being the go-to guy in this value topic. So we're excited to have you here with us today. So thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So for the rare few that have no idea who you are, that have been hiding out under a rock for the last decade, why don't you tell us who you are?
Okay, sure thing. Well, hi, everybody, and I'm so glad you're here. Hope you get a lot out of today. So my name is Ryan Lundquist. I'm an appraiser, and really I'm a market analyst, and I look at the market. That's what I really have a lot of passion for, and my whole goal, no matter what the market is doing, is to understand the market and tell the story of the market. And so I think that's kind of what I want to convey today. Okay, what's the market up to? What can we glean? What can we be watching in coming time? There's a lot of uncertainty. And so I just want to unpack that. I have a blog at sacramentoappraisalblog.com. You can check that out if you want. But hey, let's dive in though. Let's make this thing happen.
Well, let's go. So anything new happening in the market, Ryan?
Well, so I don't know if anyone noticed, but the market feels a little bit different right now. And it's a reminder that, first of all, markets change all the time. Okay, what doesn't change is often our real estate narrative, and where we get locked into the pattern of discussing real estate as if it's this commodity that only increases. And so we say it's a great time to sell and buy. But then I would ask, how's that narrative working out, right? Put that on your Facebook status and see what kind of comments you get, right? And so it's just a reminder that our narrative needs to change as the market changes. And so maybe you'll pick up some things here, but I would say that the market really began to change significantly on March 12th. That was the day where we saw, and that was what, 25th, so 13 days ago, where we had the NBA season was canceled. All local events were pretty much canceled. I canceled all my speaking engagements too. We found out Tom Hanks had coronavirus, and I think that had a very big effect on the psyche of residents, and I would say of buyers and sellers. And so since that time, what we've seen is a huge increase in canceled listings and in listings on hold. That's about 15% or slightly more of the market has said, time out, pause, we're going to be off the market. And so it's important to look at that, and that's not everyone. I think the temptation is to look at stats and to look at what's going on and think, hey, the whole entire market is doing this one thing, but that's not necessarily the case. And so, but since then, I would say that uncertainty has become sort of the word of 2020. No one predicted that, and nobody's market prediction was the word uncertainty there. And so I think that we're in a different type of market where buyers and sellers are questioning things, where people are standing off. And one of the most significant things that I'm seeing is a pretty big drop in pending contracts. And so when you look at the stats, the pendings really began to drop as soon as sort of our Tom Hanks moment happened. But then they kicked into full gear, I think, a drop when our markets became locked down. And so I'll say this, that we have a market where there's a high degree of uncertainty, where people just look at it and go, I don't know where this is going. I'm losing confidence in housing. I'm losing confidence in the job market or whether I'll have a job. And so my 401k is not something that I'm writing home about right now. And so there's a lot of, I think, from a lot of different angles where there's this uncertainty, but we still do have like this artificial market right now. What I mean is that the lockdown this past weekend, it really hampered real estate deals from happening. Obviously, the realtors here, you can't, you're not supposed to be showing properties in person. And the government in California, the governor has basically said, we want residents to do your best to stay inside. And so statistically, let me see here, this past week, pendings were down for the entire week by about 32%. But this past weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, our first lockdown weekend, pendings were down 42%. Okay, and so you kind of see that, yes, the market's reacting. And I think the temptation and when a market changes is that we begin to look to prices and we go, hey, man, prices look good for March, no big deal. But we have to remember this, that when a market changes, we see the change first in the listings and what's happening with the listings. And right now we're seeing some sellers exit the market or be hesitant, and what's happening with the pendings. And we're seeing a drop in pendings, which shows us that buyer demand has waned somewhat. Now there's still deals happening. There were 401 pending contracts over the past week in the Sacramento region. Okay, so there's deals that are getting into contract, but we see the change first in what's going on with listings and pendings. And then in about a month or two, we'll begin to know more about prices. What are prices doing? Okay, but if we focus on prices right now, then we're focusing on the wrong thing because we see the change first in the listings. Does that make sense?
100%.
So
you're
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so you're saying don't focus on our prices going down, or should they go down? Focus on the other leading indicators. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. And I think for sellers who want to list right now, it's like they're going to look at the sales and then say, hey, this is what I should be at. But then we would go, no, what's getting into contract? Okay. And sometimes the market, we're getting new information day by day. It feels like it's changing quickly, but we need to rely on the new information. Or you look at the listings. If there's listings in a neighborhood that are not selling, then you know that, okay, if we are going to list in this market, we might need to list lower. Okay, and so this is a market where there's uncertainty that's palpable. Everyone feels it. But my advice would be to the real estate community is that in terms of value, you have to do your best to toggle between listings and pendings and sales, and you have to find the market. Okay. And if you're listed and you're not getting any action, then you need to find the market and maybe reduce the price until the market bites. Okay. And so I think that's, really, really critical. And the reality is that we do have a market that, where buyers are still playing, and we have a market that, will maybe adapt somewhat, to, buying through video. I'm not entirely convinced that everyone and their mom's going to want to do that. Okay. It's sort of a holding period. And, I suspect that we're not going to have this vibrant market for as long as the virus exists, right? It just doesn't make sense to see that. That's what we saw in China and Italy. And, I think we need to get through this, and then maybe real estate can ensue, and we'll figure out what that new normal is.
What were you going to ask, Kris, earlier?
Well, no, what I mean, so Ryan, going back to, our last big peak in '05, I remember real clearly that, when we got into '06, right? So we were sort of fat, dumb, and happy in '05, and then '06, we started to get this creep in inventory, right? And it was pretty clear some things were changing. There were some job losses and some different things, and this before we even got to the mortgage resets and all those fun things. But I mean, to a degree, it largely will boil down to good old supply and demand and months of inventory, and then whether or not the consumer feels confident that they're going to have a job tomorrow or next week or next month. Is that fair?
I mean, I think so. I think supply and demand, but part of it too is, right now the market's not free. Okay, it's locked down, and so it's almost like there's bars, and what will happen is that eventually these bars will be removed, and then we'll get a sense of what's the market really like. Okay, my sense is that right now that, regardless of supply or demand or anything, we have this market that's in a sense imposed on us. Okay, and rightly so. I mean, we need to keep people safe. All right, that's the message I'm preaching. I'm not personally inspecting the interior of homes right now. It's been a choice for several weeks, and I'll do that for the foreseeable future. But my sense is that we need to, we have this market that's imposed, but we also have a market where we're going to see more realistically, once this is over, how things respond. And so, but I think you're really key that it comes down to consumer confidence, and who wants to buy. When the last bubble, the real estate bubble burst, and I'm not saying that we're at our bursting point. I think it kind of feels that way to many people. This is a huge situation. But when the real estate bubble burst, over a 1-year period in the region, we saw a 40% drop in sales volume. Okay, and so one of the clues that the market was so affected is that there were less deals going on. Okay, and so I always remind people that 60% of the market in that case was still buying, but the market had really changed. Now, when you look at prices had barely dipped for that year, but the key is that inventory had tripled, right, and sales volume was down 40%. Like, we saw the market first in the listings and the pendings, and then after a year or so, oh boy, did it catch up to prices.
So the supply and demand did catch it. It was that lag, right? I mean, that was it was saying that people were putting homes in the market, and they weren't selling. That gap got really big between activity and how many homes were pick and choose from.
Yeah, that gap really grew, and definitely one thing to watch right now. What's the gap between actual sales and listings, and I think the other layer is that you can get into contract, but are you going to close? I think it's unknown. This market hasn't happened yet. And so I'm really looking at two sets of data. There's all the pendings before March 12th, and then there's the pendings afterwards, okay? Totally different market for both of them. Okay, the stuff before, maybe you have all your inspections. And when that sale closes today, I'm not counting that as the market today. That reflects whenever that property got into contract. I'm more interested in, show me the pendings right now and show me the deals that are happening, and then eventually if they close, then okay, that'll tell us about the market. Guys, I've noticed, can I share some things that I've noticed?
Go for it.
So I've noticed that, or first of all, last weekend there were among all pendings in the region, 44.5% had more than one offer. Okay, and so It might be surprising to some,
This
but
most recent weekend?
yeah, this past weekend during lockdown weekend. Okay. Now the temptation I know in real estate, like we jump on Facebook, we're like, the market's hot. Like, I'm not saying that, but I think we have to recognize that there are some price ranges where buyers might think that you're going to have this crazy good deal, but that might not be reality. An agent on Twitter this morning that I was talking to, and she said, I listed yesterday at 389 and the seller is looking at several different offers today. And so it just goes to show that just because the market is in a funky place, it's in a lockdown, and there's uncertainty, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is sagging. And so that it just, in every single neighborhood, ask yourself, where is the market in this particular place? That's really the key. We can't project, county or regional stats. We've got to know, what is the market doing right here? The proof of value is found in the market. So we have to, it's like analyze the listings and the pendings and the withdrawals, the canceled, and talk to other agents and talk to appraisers or whoever within that area. Okay, but I've also heard sentiment about lenders struggling with jumbo loans. Have you guys all been hearing that over the last couple days? And
Just
so
this morning, yeah.
yeah, and so if that becomes an issue where lenders back off of jumbo, then we could see an effect in the market at a higher price point. Okay, I think it would be sensational right now to say that the high end market has declined, because that's not true. And one of the things that in an uncertain time, it's tempting, I think, in a couple ways, where to either have rose colored glasses, where we're like, man, the market's on fire and it's good, and it's like we're not seeing the trend. Okay, I've been talking to friends and clients and saying there's a huge difference between being positive in life
Yeah.
and looking at real estate stats. So be positive in life, let nothing shake you. Okay, but take an honest look at stats. Okay, those are two different things. Okay, but and I forgot what else I was going to say. So
Well, I read that in your blog, or I heard you say it in your blog. I can't remember which now, and I really appreciate it, because being an optimist myself, I find myself looking at numbers and going, oh, these numbers don't look so. So I really appreciate you sharing that with this group, that, yeah, we want to be, optimistic about life in general. And there's a reality of numbers that begin to tell a tale at some point.
yeah, and the reality is we don't know where this market's going to go. And I was going to say, what I was going to say is to be careful about sensationalism. There's certain real estate shows or real estate personalities who put out information and everything sounds like doom and gloom. And it sounded that way for many years. And everything is this clickable headline to go, oh my gosh, everything is falling apart. And look, if everything is falling apart, let's not argue against that. But I think what happens with sensationalism is that it leads to a lack of credibility. And so right now, I think it's really important for the real estate community to assess, is this information accurate? Is what I'm sharing, is it hearsay? Is it market data? Does it reflect what's actually happening within the market? I think that's a critical question. And in some cases, we're going to have to suspend judgment and say, I need to wait for the data on this before I really speak into this.
Yeah, it is really fascinating to look at this, and we talked about this right before we started. Most agents, when they look at stats, they'll look at it month over month or something like that. Now we're even going down day by day, week by week. And there's little stories in there that we need to address. Like, we went on lockdown on this date, right? And how did Friday drop off because of the lockdown, and how did that compare to the previous Friday? Right, so there's all these little nuances in here. I agree with you completely that it's unknown territory. And I love the fact that you said that, I forget the percentage, but there were multiple offers on a certain percentage of properties. Even during the downturn in 07, 08, I would still get multiple offers on properties if I read the data correctly and priced the home properly.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
It's just looking at it and understanding, and hey, if we just kind of pump the brakes right now because of everything that's going on, like you said, the bars will come off and it will open back up again. And then we'll be able to tell, hey, is the economy going this way or that way? We don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that note, I'm putting out graphs that show daily data for what listings are doing and what pendings are doing. And I highly recommend for everyone, try to follow those. I'm putting them out on Twitter, on my Facebook page, or just send me an email. I can send you those 4 different graphs I'm making every single day. But what you can learn is, what does the market normally do? I always tell people, what's normal for the market for March or April or May or June? But I think what we ask now is what's normal for the week, or what normally happens on Monday? And this sounds super technical and anal, but on Monday, without fail, almost every single week, we see more pending contracts. And why is that? Because pendings come in over the weekend and then the seller accepts them on Monday. And so without fail, and so this week we saw more pendings on Monday. And the temptation, if we're not in touch with sort of that weekly rhythm, how the market goes, we could be like, oh my gosh, the market's coming back, everybody, it's crazy. So, these people were saying that real estate was down. No, it's not. And so, but we have to know is like, okay, this is how the market normally behaves. Or Thursday is usually the pinnacle for new listings coming to the market. All right. And so because people are getting ready for the weekend. All right. And so we're kind of like looking at the stats day by day just to say, well, what are listings doing? Are people coming to the market? Are they not? Are they engaging? And we just compare this Monday versus last Monday. And so just be ready for that type of analysis. I think that will, help,
For sure.
your clients. And so, was
So-
that too anal, or is that actually
No,
helpful?
it makes
I
a
hope
lot
so.
of sense. And I think right now in these uncharted waters, we have to look at it like that, right? Because we can look at it differently when it's a normal, I'm going to use normal loosely, market, right? Because the market's always kind of flexing and bending and turning depending on seasonality and all these variables. Right now, I just think there's too much stuff coming at us that can artificially change or drive things. So we have to look at what's happening right now and in context of where that other data lies.
Yeah.
So there's some questions in here. Eli is asking, so it sounds like it's best to price to the actives until we get, sorry if I could talk. Sounds like it's best to price to the actives until we see the impact versus the closed. That's the question. Meaning try our best to advise clients to be the best priced home, correct?
I think in a market where there's less buyers buying, you need to stand out. Okay. And sellers probably need to offer credits and such if the market demands you to do that. But yeah, you want to look to what's actually moving and what are you really similar to. Okay. But I would say that with sales, just remember, sales are like historical documents. They tell us what the market used to be like. And so if something closes on March 25th, it doesn't tell me anything about today. It tells me what the market used to be like in February when it got into contract. And so remember that analogy, use that analogy with sellers, okay? Because they're gonna need to understand, well, where is current value? And when a market changes, we see value in what is actually moving. Okay, and so that's really key. So yes, price according to the pendings, but this is where I would say be careful about projecting a headline on the market, because if everyone and their mom is talking about how real estate is tanking and this is so uncertain, but then that agent yesterday priced something and had multiple offers when it was at 389, or an investor I talked to this morning on my Facebook page priced below 400 got into contract immediately. So the temptation would be to project this idea and go, the market is doom and gloom. And then we put that on our listing when in fact, what should have happened is that we should have looked to the market and done a CMA and really looked at all the data and said, let that inform my pricing strategy. Does that make sense? That's going to be the temptation in this market. And I think there'd be a lot of mistakes. And the data is right in front of us, though, if we really look at it.
Well, I think also too, it goes to the motivation of the seller, right? That's one piece in there. Obviously they want to sell. They don't want to just put their house on the market. If there are fewer buyers out there, we do want to price ahead of the market on wherever we are, because who knows where this is going to go. And if we can't show homes, pricing it more accurately, you can get the thing into escrow a little bit faster.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then Tracy was asking about appraisers aren't going into homes, and so how are appraisals being accomplished? Will this delay most loans right now? Yeah, we have an interesting thing where Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and came out, and a lot of lenders are starting to say that we're going to have appraisers do more exterior only products, or there'll be sort of a hybrid situation where an appraiser will basically look at the outside, kind of do a drive-by, but maybe talk to the agent or the occupant, get someone to, do FaceTime or sort of this curbside appraisal dynamic where you can have someone do the inside for you, basically. And so will that happen in loans? I think it's to be determined. It's very early. My sense is that this news came out on Monday and everyone was talking about it, but then I hear appraisers in Facebook groups complaining that these appraisal management companies, they're asking me to go in the house and I don't want to go in the house. And so I think we have a lot of change coming in front of us. My hope as an appraiser is that all lenders and Fannie Mae will say appraisers cannot go inside the house. Okay. Will that delay some deals? Yes. But I think that's where we need to put safety above real estate transactions. Okay. I don't care. I don't want an appraiser to go to my parents' house if my parents need to refi. Okay. It's not worth it to me. Hey, rates aren't even at 3% anymore. So people can wait too, right? Just kidding. So, but it's to be determined. There are situations where an appraiser is not going to be able to come up with a credible value without seeing the inside. And so I talked to an owner who has a very large home, 8,000 square feet and custom home. And there's no way that I would ever do a drive-by on a property like that, or something in Wilton on 5 acres. You would be insane to do a drive-by on something like that, Kris, like at Chris's house, right? And so there will be certain delays, I expect, but I think that everyone's going to have to try to catch up. One of my concerns, to be honest, is appraisal management companies offering really low fees for exterior products. And so if appraisers as vendors are really backed up right now, they have been, it's not a good idea to look at this drive-by product and say, well, let's just cut the fee in half, because if it's just an exterior appraisal, it's not that much less work, when the appraiser does the inspection, but it's a lot more liability, and the appraiser's talking to different people trying to find out about the interior. And so I think this is going to be a hurdle, to be honest. I think some appraisers might resist it, but we'll see what happens. I think information's changing every day, and I'm hopeful that the kibosh will kind of come down on colleagues who are still inspecting the interior. And I don't mean to diss my colleagues online, but I think we've reached a point in many places in the United States where we have to consider safety more than anything.
Absolutely. And Greg jumped in here and said, what will happen with FHA appraisals?
Well, I haven't heard definitively on FHA, but FHA has been about 18% of the market in Sacramento County, and so clearly there's a lot of FHA that's been going on so far this year. I think a lot of assumptions. Drive-bys have always been off limits with FHA, but hopefully FHA will color outside of the lines. If there's a loan officer in here and you've heard directly from a HUD, then maybe you can speak up. But if exterior products come into play, that's where an appraiser would have a lot of disclaimers in there. So kind of hard to test the appliances, though, in the systems if you're not going in the house, though. But hopefully that wouldn't hamper FHA. If anything, I think their mission is to get people in homes. And so hopefully they would be able to speak into that.
Okay. And Karen said Karen Dunn with Big Valley. HUD hasn't commented on what they're going to do with appraisals yet. So
yeah.
There's a couple other things in here. When doing a CMA for a potential listing, what are the key things I should look at, i.e. pendings, new listings, all of the above, right?
All the above, but when I pull a CMA in every appraisal report, I'm looking at the number of recent sales, the number of pendings, and the number of listings. Okay, that's a good way to kind of assess, is the market balanced? Because here's the issue. If you see a lot of listings and there's very few sales, that tells us that we probably have an oversupply.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so if you see a neighborhood and there's very few listings, I mean, today, that could mean that, hey, everyone's pulled off the market. So be careful of that. But if you see very few listings and then everything is getting into contract, then you might go, wow, this is a hot neighborhood. People are pulling the trigger. And so I'd say on a CMA, sort of look for that balance or imbalance, and how many of things are going on. I would say look on days on market for recent sales, look at days on market for current actives, and look on days on market for pendings. Okay, and also look at the sales price, the original list price to sales price ratio. Okay, or how much lower are people buying homes for? You know, maybe it was 98% among recent sales, but you kind of look at pendings, and if you see that percentage drop, you know, the original pending price, and then here's what the most recent list price is, and you see that drop to 95%, then you're like, oh, maybe the market's a little softer. And so those are some of the things I look for on a CMA. I'm trying to mine it for data, and like just milk it for all it's worth to increase my knowledge.
But I think what's important in this conversation right here is when the market's going well, we can get away with not being as skilled in comping properties as when the market is in a interesting time like this, or when it's in transition, right? And
Yep.
and so when that's why we're really digging into some of these. There's so many variables you look at, and it's super important to really hone your skills. I mean, some of us have some extra time on our hands right now, and it would behoove us to go in and really look at this data to understand what's going on in the market, so that we can also hone those skills if there is a transition, so we can be prepared and price the homes appropriately. I just remember, and I've shared this before, I remember when I had just gotten into residential sales, and I'm going to share a story I've shared on some other things. I got into residential sales, and a friend of mine was a FSBO. It didn't sell, and so they decided to list with me. And I knew, based on the data that I saw, if we listed at 385, it would probably sell. Because they're my friends, they talked me into 405, and the market was in transition, and then it started going south. And then literally, we listed at 405. We could have sold at 385. Probably 8, 9, 10 months later, we sold for 315.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you right now, the time that we spend learning how to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and having some of the direct conversations with our clients on what they need to do to price their home appropriately to get it sold in the time frame that they would like to get it sold in. Having some of those upfront conversations, the fear of having those is way less than the guilt of costing your friends a ton of money because you didn't have it and didn't hone your skills.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think getting people on the same page for proper pricing is just so critical. And, you know, sellers have been in charge in our market for, this was the 9th year. And I think sellers have lost serious power. And I would say that it's probably a buyer's market in many areas, but it's still really competitive in some price ranges. And so you got to get your sellers on the right page. Help them to not price according to price per square foot. Okay, help them to price according to what is similar and moving right now. Okay, I think it's kind of like the stock market too. You know, if I'm going to buy stock, I'm not going to look at stock from 3 months ago. I'm going to ask, what is it selling for today? And so in real estate, when we look at sales that are recent, it's almost like looking at the market from a month or two ago. But if I want to buy real estate today, it's about today. So just find your pet analogies, whatever's going to work. Or like, you don't want to buy, you know, Beanie Babies based on 1990s prices, you know, when they were $3,000 on eBay. You want to buy based on today, which is probably like $2. Okay. And so whatever analogies work for your clients. Sorry, I'm immature. So
No, I remember running from store to store.
I was wondering why I couldn't sell my Beanie Babies.
No, I actually own one as a prop. I was never a collector, so just want to clarify that. Let's get that out of the way right now. So
Appreciate it. So another question here, Ryan, have you heard anything about appraisers contacting sellers to get on video call with them, to view the home and walk them around? Just be a way for them to see the home without actually visiting the home physically.
So that's been a theoretical conversation. I don't know if that's showing up right now in purchases. Lenders might look at it differently between purchases and refis. Okay, first of all, so we're going to have to see if this theoretical idea actually happens in the market. I hope that it does. For my private appraisals for, you know, estate or divorce or whatever, I am doing that. You know, I have a couple this week that I'll be doing, you know, FaceTime. I'm in my car, and then they're walking me through the house. Okay. And so, you know, that can happen, but it's been theoretical. There's been a lot of conversation online with appraisers and talking with the GSEs that stuff like this can happen. I don't know if it's really trickled down to the market. And my concern is that I do wonder if it's just sort of a lip service thing too, because if everyone's still ordering full interiors, you know, are these, you know, ideas from Fannie Mae really being implemented? Maybe loan officers can speak to that if you've seen it yet. I've yet to, but I'll let you know as soon as I do. So remember, this is all happening. Appraisers have been talking about it for a couple weeks, but Fannie and Freddie just brought it out literally 2 days ago on Monday. And so it's happening quick.
So we got another one from Mr. Paul Boudier. I tell everybody when I'm having a bad day, I just call Paul and listen to his voicemail. Not that he doesn't answer the phone, just his voicemail will get you fired up. If a motivated seller wanted to overprice their property, would Ryan consider an appraisal upfront to determine the better list value?
Yes and no. It depends on whether the seller will listen. Okay, if the owner's not willing to listen to anyone, then I hope that your sign gets a lot of traffic and you get some leads from that. Okay. And so if the seller will listen to an appraiser, then that could be a tool that you use. If the market's changing very quickly, then that's where it might be a good idea to maybe have more consulting with an appraiser, come up with, here's what it looks like a reasonable range of value where we don't have this 40-page appraisal report that looks like it was with looks like it belongs to a lender. And so I think maybe consulting somehow with an appraiser could be a really good idea. On that note, I will say this, I want to be your bad cop, okay? I'm going to be putting out a lot of data, and it's never sensational. It's always, the straight truth. And if some of my graphs will help convince your sellers that, oh, wow, look at how pendings have dipped, then that could be an opportunity for you to be the good cop, and then I'm the bad cop to say, you need to price it right. Okay, and so whatever you can do in that regard, but I think getting them on the same page is really, really critical.
Absolutely. And here's what's interesting looking at some of these questions as they're coming in. I'll let Ryan read that question. I'm seeing a need for a scripting kind of conversation about how to have some of these conversations with the sellers. Are you seeing that, Kris?
Yeah, absolutely. And when Ryan was talking a minute ago, what I was thinking about, and you heard me say this on one or two of our calls also, but to a degree, this starts to become a little bit more like being a good doctor as opposed to a residential person, right? Where you're actually telling the patient what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And so really approaching it from that perspective of, the data is what the data is if you have hard, fast numbers, right? And being able to have that honest conversation. But yeah, scripting is crucial beyond measure in this market ahead, I believe.
100%. Because I'm hearing a lot of stuff in here, which goes back to how do I have that conversation with the seller to make sure that we're on the same page and we're looking to accomplish the goal. Because I remember when the market turned last time, and it's to be determined because we have some outside factors that are kind of pumping the brakes a little bit. I remember when the market turned, the competition was that people would tell people what they needed to hear or wanted to hear in order to get the listing. And it ultimately wouldn't sell the house, which was the goal. And so I think having the ability to have some of those conversations, Paul Badia says he'd love to be on a script panel in Elk Grove, no overalls this time.
We can't see him, we'll be on Zoom.
Yeah, and so I look at this and I go, I think there's an opportunity to have some conversations here that would help people, conversations meaning scripting conversations that would help people have conversations with their clients to make sure that their goal is accomplished. So, Ryan, you're going to jump in there?
Oh, I was just going to say, Nikki was asking, can you help me understand that, okay, there's comps, the sellers put a lot of upgrades in the home. How does an appraiser put that in effect? Like newer roof, HVAC, flooring, countertop, do appraisers take that into consideration? And I'd say theoretically, yes. I mean, hopefully, if it's something that the market values, what we have to do, we have to look to the comps for the answers, okay? Because a seller might say, hey, man, I did this, my bathroom, it looks like Darth Vader's bathroom, and I have these, $3,000 Brazilian faucets, and we go, okay, well, that's a little interesting. But we have to look to the comps and say, what is the market paying for something competitive? And so if a house has a new roof, a new HVAC, and new windows and all that stuff, I'm trying to find those features in other homes, not one by one, because a buyer doesn't go to a new house and go, oh, wow, there's like one new window, I'm going to pay $200 more. I know it costs $400, but buyers aren't that sensitive. Buyers look at the whole package. And so if I can find other comps that are representative, that if this subject was not available, these other properties would be substitutes. That's what a comp really is. And so if I can find those other comps with similar remodeling, that tells me what those features are worth, okay? That sounds a little wishy-washy, but I think that's the best that we can do. We've got to look to the market for the answers and let the market speak. And just yesterday on Facebook, someone was asking, if a house was worth $395 and then there's a $25,000 roof, is it all of a sudden worth $420? And I would say good luck, because buyers expect for a working roof to be in place. It's a maintenance item. Now, is it an upgrade? Of course it's better for the house. Of course it was expensive, but buyers already expect that. And so they're not going to, if they're reasonable, they're not going to look and go, yeah, I'll pay 25 grand the full cost of that. That's just not how it works. And so we got to be careful with some of those upgrades, because the seller might say, well, hey, I spent, $53,000 on everything. And that doesn't mean the home's worth $53,000 more though, right? Don't we see that with solar panels every time? Hey, I spent 40 grand on this. The solar salesman said it was worth 40 more. Well, let's look to comps that have solar and see what they're actually worth. They're probably not selling anywhere close to what the cost was.
So Ryan, I have a
Most
question.
people, I was just going to say, I'm betting most people don't get solar just for the appreciation of their home, right? They're not putting a swimming pool in for the appreciation of their home. They're putting in for their own personal use.
They are. And then when they sell 2 years later, then they say, I didn't think I was going to sell because I wouldn't have done that. Flippers don't put in solar. I think that gives us a clue. Flippers have a short-term game, and solar is the marathon, and buyers are sprinting to the market. They're not going to pay for a marathon during a sprint.
So Ryan, you go out an appraisal. So let's just hypothetically say a home just pended yesterday. And in your mind, that March 12th was March 12th, the day that everything changed. But let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, that home is in escrow for the same value that the last 3 comparable properties, 30, 45 days ago sold for. How do you take that? Because I remember, again, back to the big declines in the market. That's when appraisers started saying, well, the market's declining. But in the middle, where we don't really know what the consequence is going to be, how do you value those property post March 12th in looking in your rearview mirror for properties that sold 30, 60, 90 days ago?
That's a good question. And I think it's important to not project the idea of the market tanking when I'm doing an evaluation, or when anyone in this webinar is. Because if we do that, then we're not being objective. We're bringing this idea that here's what the market's doing, rather than letting the market speak to us. Okay. And so, first of all, I want to look for a pattern of pendings. I don't want to base my entire perception of the market on one pending. Okay, that's one data point, right? If I go to the mall and I see one person wearing overalls, I can't come home and say, hey, guess what? Overalls are back in style.
That was Paul Boudier, by the way.
Yeah, okay, I just had to say that. I don't know what's going on, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If it's one example of one guy, Paul, wearing overalls, that doesn't mean that everyone else is. Now, if I see a pattern though, and I'm like, wow, I'm at this barbecue and there's this dude wearing overalls, or there's some woman wearing overalls, and I'm think maybe there's something to it. And it's the same in real estate, because if we see a pattern and there's multiple pendings, I realize they might not be in the same neighborhood. Maybe they're in a competitive area. In the real estate textbooks, it's always like on the same street, model matches. But in our analysis, let's look to the market area. And even if it's a little wider, we can get a sense like, no, these properties are moving. If we see one, it's ideal to maybe contact the agent. Hey, can you give me more information here? Whether the agent will talk to you or not, that's always my goal as an appraiser. If there's one, I may call and say, hey, can you let me know, is the contract price somewhere around where it was pending for? So maybe I'll get that, maybe I won't.
One of the things I think about when I'm in uncertain times like this, if the market's turning and whatnot, I look at how do other agents look at properties, because a lot of buyers are coming from other agents, right? When we go into the back end of the MLS, we have that 2-line section that tells us, here's the address, here's the square footage, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the price per square foot, just kind of some basic stuff. So for me in a market, and you guys can, if you disagree with me, I'm open to that. I just look at if I want to be competitive, because the thing that's going to cause a home to sell in the shortest amount of time and the highest price is the amount of eyeballs I get on that property. Right? And so if I'm doing a search for a home as an agent, I'm looking at that list. I'm going to pull based on the comps that my buyer wants to see. I'm going to look at that list and I'm going to do the little checkbox and remove anything that I don't want, or just check the ones I do want and keep those. And if I don't find the exact property in that list, then I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and start digging into photos and what this property has and what it doesn't have. I want my seller's home to be on that first list every single time.
Yeah.
Just to get the most amount of eyeballs so that we can get the highest price in the shortest amount of time. So just something to think about on how other agents are looking at the MLS, in my opinion. Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I way off base?
No, you want to show up on that list, and in the advent of the internet. And so this is the other part, right? We're not even looking at agents really now, because we know the consumer is doing their shopping often before they ever get a hold of us in the first place. So, and regardless, we want to show up on the top of those lists, right?
Yeah, I think one thing to consider is that the market's been extremely price sensitive in recent years, and increasing the level of uncertainty is bound to increase sensitivity towards prices. And one of the things that I've been telling agent friends is that, you know, a longer escrow right now is a hard thing, because if uncertainty presumably increases, then it can frighten buyers and people can walk. And so, but I think in terms of pricing, it just underscores the importance of being priced right. And I will say, I get what you're saying about eyeballs, but I always think of the most expensive homes in usually the world, and even in our market, almost, I mean, so many times they don't even sell. Like that $250 million, you know, listing in Bel Air that ended up selling for $94 million almost 2 years after the listing. It had the most viral exposure ever, and it had the attention of the world. And so it had a ton of eyeballs, but the price wasn't right, so it didn't sell. And so I get the eyeballs idea, what you're saying, but
Yep.
I'm just saying too, like, if it's not priced right in a price sensitive market where I think buyers are gaining power and they're more prone to be even more sensitive. And I think in their psyche, what can happen with buyers in a market like today is that they can think that, hey, I'm going to back out of contract. We're going to wait and get something else, you know, lower, or I have way more power. Now, the market is not going to give them that power in every single price range. So it's a mistake, like I said, to project this idea that the market is the same at every level. No, it's not. You might have to bring a very strong offer in certain price segments, like those examples I was sharing, price under 400, multiple offers. Okay.
Yep. Well, I do agree with you on that, because the thing I was looking at is the amount of eyeballs for pricing it in that range.
Yeah.
Right. So the way where I take what you just said, I look at it and say, okay, if I'm priced a little bit above market and there's a home that's right here, and I spend a ton of money getting the most marketing out there so the most eyeballs see it, I'm probably spending that money to sell this house.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
If you like this house for $450, wait till I show you this one for $425.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So I agree with you completely on that analogy. So
Yeah. And I just looked too, and I just asked the question. I just finished an appraisal on my desk, and say it was around 425. That was the
how much was
price.
your desk worth?
My desk? Oh, so much. So yeah, I realize that. Good one. So,
Quick.
so I finished this appraisal, and I'm just asking the question, hey, what can you get right now for 425 in the market? So I think sometimes we're so focused on a price, but we're not backing up just to say, what can people get right now? You know, of any size. And so why would they buy this property then?
Right.
It's not consistent with the comps, or it's just, you get such a better house or a better neighborhood, so to speak. And so I just think we have to be maybe more aware. And I would say in neighborhoods, you know the neighborhood really well, but you know, keep going out a little bit to understand what's happening in other neighborhoods too, because that might be a clue into the market. Because the buyers, they're rarely looking in one really tight area. Sometimes they are, but sometimes, like a buyer that I talked to recently said, yeah, I was considering Carmichael and Elk Grove, right? You don't want to look at everything between Carmichael and Elk Grove, but there might be Carmichael and then 95821 and some surrounding zip codes where I'm going, I just want to understand what value's doing here.
Awesome. So can I ask you an unscripted question? Kind of a little deviation from this.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the iBuyers hitting the pause button?
I think iBuyers have, they've come into the market with razor thin margins. And I think before they started, one of the critiques was that you guys might be able to be successful in an upward market, right? But when a market changes, there's more risk. And so what they would have to do is acquire properties at a significant discount. And that's not likely, the idea of convenience, it's not very convenient for sellers to sell at a tremendously discounted rate. So I think right now they're on pause. You have companies that were certainly have been gaining ground in Sacramento. I think it's to be determined whether they're dead in the water, but they're definitely on pause. It doesn't make sense for them right now. I think far too risky. And keep in mind too that even though construction is an essential business, it might be more difficult to get construction workers to flip homes in mass. If you're, buying 20 homes a month, or like Open Door owns about 100 at any given time, and that's a lot of homes to work for if your crew starts to get sick. And so I think that the virus outbreak certainly compounds that issue, and it just shows that you can have great ideas, but they might not work in every market.
But I just look at that and I'll just say it. They put out these news articles saying they're going to pause it because of health concerns. I'm just going to say that I think there's more to it than just health concerns. Obviously, they want to protect their people and protect people going through their properties. I think that's them waiting to see what happens in the market as well and not putting out any undue risk.
For sure. But hey, I have to give props though to there's a tech company, Open Door. Actually, they locked their lock boxes, and you have the advantage if you're a tech company with gazillions of dollars to do that. And meanwhile, everyone else is like, I need to make a buck. But there is something respectable about that, and I always want to be objective and look at that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, markets change, right? I don't think anyone saw this change coming.
So over the weekend, how many? I don't know if you have the numbers up in front of you. How many homes sold over the weekend?
So I'm not analyzing sales data right now on purpose, because anything that closed over the weekend, it doesn't matter. That tells us about the market in February. Okay, when March ends, I'll crunch March numbers, and then we'll look on a monthly basis, compare March and April. We'll really be able to get a sense soon of what's happening with prices. Okay, but for now, I think it's all about analyzing listings, pendings, withdrawals, canceled, word on the street, what's happening in different price ranges. We gauge all that stuff first, and all this stuff will eventually show up in the prices maybe 2 or 3 months down the road.
So I'm not expecting you to have it all off the top of your head. Do you have any ballpark on how many listings? You might have it in there. How many listings and how many pendings over the weekend?
Pendings over the weekend. Let me see. I wrote it down.
About I'm going with this question.
Yeah, Friday through Monday, there were about 175. It might have gotten up to about 190 or so. You got to kind of keep watching pendings. If you pull them too soon, there's always a lag because agents and offices might enter them on Tuesday, even though they were pending on Monday. But less than 200 in the region. Same time period last week was a little bit more than 300. And so, like I said, this week in the region, there's just over 400 pendings. And so, something to pay attention to. The week before, it was closer to 600. Okay.
Have you ever seen it gone down to zero?
No. So interestingly enough, China, I shared a graph. I've been doing updates on YouTube lately. The Chinese market came to a standstill. I don't know if it got down to zero, but I mean, when you look at this graph, it was seriously flat. Okay. They had an imposed, very strict government situation, but I don't suspect our market would go down to zero unless the MLS and associations and the government said, hey, real estate community, you need to stop altogether. And then all the data stops, okay? But even then, what I think would happen is that some people would be trying to do pocket listings. There's always going to be things happening in a market, right or wrong. I know a lot of people are showing houses and stuff. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, the CDC. You figure out, what you can do there, okay? But yeah, it's definitely not at zero. And the reality is, I don't know if we talked about this. we might be able to see some pent-up demand after this is all over. Now, Sacramento County said that there was going to be a lockdown in place through April 7th, but then the state of California came along and supersedes Sacramento. And so we don't really know how long this whole thing will last, unless it's come out today, and I haven't seen it in the news yet. But the reality is that we'll have this period where the market is artificially subdued, okay? Now, I do believe pendings would be decreasing no matter what, whether you had the lockdown or not now. But it's possible we could see more demand expressed as the market is freed in the future. But I think the big question that we have to ask, the objective question, is what kind of market will buyers be waking up to then? And what will job losses be like then? Okay, I think that's not doom and gloom. It's a very real thing as we're looking at stats. Like, remember, the unemployment rate in Sacramento County right now is 3.2%. And so you could send out your newsletter and go, hey guys, this is great news. We're at 3.2%. But here's the thing, the trend is happening now. The trend has happened where people have lost jobs. We don't see it in the stats. That's the same exact thing with pendings. We see the trend in the pendings. We don't see it in the sales stats, but we will. So does that make sense?
100%.
So
those are all lagging indicators, right? So
yeah. But I think in real estate, we're all like, we just focus so much on prices. We're not realizing that lagging issue. And that's the thing to explain to sellers and, and consumers right now. So they really see, where is the current market at? Like, that's the golden question.
Johnny's asking a question just about essential business. So real quick answer to that question. Yes, I have seen different parts of the country that have declared real estate an essential business, aspects of real estate an essential business. And I've seen other states that have said, real estate period, don't do it. You can't even cold call until September 7th.
Yeah. I was talking to my MAPS coach at 7 a.m. this morning. He's from Philly, right? So he's in PA. And he said to me, they came out originally saying that they were not essential. Then they said, you are essential. And now they've said, you're not essential.
Yeah. It's all over the map. I know I've heard a lot about appraisers, but CAR had a Q&A, and CAR said appraisers aren't essential. I'm kind of like, wait, are appraisers part of CAR? Like, why are you talking about us? But same thing for us. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting times. That's for sure.
We could open up that can of worms.
I know. I had to put that in there publicly. I'm just trying to.
We're not.
Understand.
I don't disagree with you, Ryan.
So
I think here's what I was asking you. Have you ever seen the amount of transactions go to zero? Is because one way or another, people will always need a roof over their head. Whether the market's going up, real estate transactions are happening. If it's going down, real estate transactions are happening. It's just the way it is. And if it actually goes to zero, that will be, people will still move. They'll still have job transfers. Life will still happen, and things will need to change. And so that will create, if it goes to zero, there will be a pent up demand. And I don't think it will go to zero. One of the things I love that Gary Keller always says, hey, if the market goes from selling 200 homes to 25 homes, is that bad? And most people would say yes. And then he says, what if you sold all 25? Right?
There you go.
It's bad, but it's not bad for you. And so I think the whole premise of this conversation is, now is the time to become the expert, the local economist of choice, and hone your skills on this kind of stuff and work to communicate to your database, because the business will always happen. In a transition, again, there's other circumstances right now. In a transition is when we see that kind of little slowdown like we've talked about, until it figures out which way it's going to go. And then once it goes, we're back in business, and it's the people that are in the conversation with their clients that are going to get the business, regardless of which way it goes.
Definitely. And I think one thing to consider also is that, like in 2007, the market changed drastically, and it was never at zero, but I mean, there was a collective pause where people pumped the brakes and said, whoa, I'm out of here. And there still were people buying, but it was very dark and very gloomy. And I think it underscores the reality that there will always be buyers for a certain market. The market is never good or bad for everyone. Okay. So most people move because of their lifestyle, but when prices really begin to change and market dynamics change, or people lose confidence, there is sort of this pausing moment where people are going to wait. And so we don't know what the future but I would just be aware that it's possible that people could pump the brakes in the future if, everything sort of hits the fan, so to speak. But I think for agents, it just underscores, I would say, make sure that you're working really hard to connect with people, add value to their lives. I see so many people on Facebook. It's like one person posts something that gets a lot of likes and then everyone copies it. And I would say that be the person on the cutting edge to do stuff that other people are going to copy. Connect with people, serve them more ever than now. You're not going to be serving them right now in a ton of transactions because there are not a lot of transactions happening. But I would just say, if it's my place to say, I'd say that, look at these next, couple months ahead or however long it's going to be and say, you know what, I'm going to maybe cut some expenses, but I'm going to serve like never before. And then, business might be somewhat meager here, then hopefully eventually it'll pick up. Okay. And so that's my mindset. That's what I'm trying to do. But I see a lot of people, you guys are adding value with something like this. And I just think, how can we add value to people right now? What do people need and how can we meet their needs in their lives? Do we really care about people or do we just care about transactions? And I think true colors, it's a market of true colors where we're going to see that come and rise. And so I think we're all going to be tested in that regard. Do we really give a rip? And so, that was my sermon.
It goes back to the tale of two worlds. We have the finite game of what's happening in the here and now and the infinite game, which is our career.
So Ryan, just yesterday morning, Patrick and I got an email from an attorney that we work with and trying to get some good information. And she started the whole email by saying a few things. And then she said in caps, don't be a lemming. Right. So what you just said is spot on. And I'm going to use that quote. And this is the market of true colors. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no, right on. And I know someone, if I could just address, someone asked about pending data. Okay, so first, usually it's a 1% chance the appraiser will change their valuation. I know appraisers probably aren't, so sorry about that, but that's a very real dynamic. But someone asked about pending sales and my data. I don't have a comparison of pendings before and after. I've been running like crazy to put out information. It's been fun and exhilarating and totally exhausting. I'm putting in an incredible amount of hours. What I want to ask of you, if you need specific pending data, please be emailing me or comment on my Facebook page. Kris, now you're not going to the bathroom, right? I was just going to say, because brother, we can see you. And I just wanted to be sure, man.
I love that you said that.
I had to, just in case. There was that one viral video with the Florida councilman. I didn't want to have that happen here. Okay, sorry. Real quick, though, comment on my Facebook page and status and ask me these questions online because I'm pulling new data constantly, but the questions you guys are asking me will help prod me to create new visuals that I've never done before, and it'll help me to articulate what exactly you need, okay? And so I'm just asking you, I need to hear from you, and then I can respond specifically, okay? So I'm getting like flooded every single day with stuff, but that'll help me formulate things, okay?
Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Ryan. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you hopping on here. I know we were texting over the weekend and it's like, man, I need to get you in front of all these people because there's a lot of questions and now is the time to hone our skills, and you are a wealth of knowledge on market data and how to look at it. So I appreciate you jumping on here. Anything you want to close out with, Kris? Oh, you're muted. All right, I muted you. There you go.
There, we good?
Yep.
I usually mute myself when I go to the bathroom. No, I appreciate not only the statistical information and the insights there, but really just and that last little what you called your sermon. I really appreciated the heart of that, and that says a lot about you just as a person, aside from being an awesome. What did you call yourself earlier? Value analyst.
Appraiser, market analyst.
I know the appraiser part.
Yeah, well,
I know I'm from Wilton.
Right.
I know I'm from Wilton, but I'm half bright.
Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, Ryan, very much. I can only imagine how busy you are with people asking for stuff like this. So thank you.
Yeah. Hey, no problem, guys. Let's do it again. And if
Yep.
everyone, if this is helpful, hit
Yep.
these guys up again. Let's do something.
Cool.
And if we need a more focused conversation, totally cool. I'm around, but thanks so much.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.